Be a buddy, not a bully. Gotta be a buddy. Be a buddy, not a bully. Gotta be a buddy. Gotta be a buddy. Everybody gotta be a buddy.
All right, is everybody eating good? Plenty more back there if you want seconds. We got plenty to go around. I want to welcome everybody tonight. We are so excited for this evening to have made it through to the end of the 6 weeks of the summer work program successfully. So if we can give a round of applause to all the kids. And then kids, if we can give a round of applause to your parents. There should be some whistling, stand ovation stuff going on here. And we will get into thanking the team for all of their work in a little bit. We wanted to kick off this evening with an incredible presentation. So we have a young man who grew up in the Zion school system, and I was at a program at the high school, the Zion Leadership Academy, which is for adults, and Jaquanda Nelson, a dear friend of mine, had brought in somebody that I knew when he was much younger, and he put on a presentation that I literally sat in the seat at the lecture hall at the high school and cried. So we got him to come back last year with his crew, with all four of those, or the other three of those guys, and they did their presentation. And this year, Calvin asked if he could switch it up and do something that we don't even know what he's doing. But he is the owner, operator, producer of the Free Lunch Academy. He is in Chicago doing incredible things. He's homegrown, he's one of us, and I'm really thrilled that you were here tonight, that you could come back and give back to the kids in our community. So without further ado, Mr. Calvin King III with Free Lunch Academy.
Thank you. Do I need this one as well or just this one? George? Do I need both? He sleep? George? Do I need both? Do I need this one too? Okay. All right, how's everybody doing today? Hey, Richard, I didn't even see you, man. I did not see you when I walked in, bro. Love. How's everybody doing today? Come on now. I know y'all eating, but those of y'all that don't have a mouthful of food, how y'all doing? All right, there we go, man. Well, I'm one of Zion's finest, as well as you are. My name's Calvin Leroy King III, one of the Joppa boys, one of the originators, you know, all that good stuff. Homegrown, man, so I'm very excited to be here, very honored and blessed to just have this opportunity to speak to you all. As was mentioned earlier, performed actually last year, and we did a performance called Be a Buddy, Not a Bully. It's a stage play that we tour around Chicago, Northwest Indiana, even out here whenever they invite us, you know what I'm saying, and things like that. And we just try to help young people overcome the challenges of bullying-related behavior and conflict, and we just try to create this inclusive learning environment. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Please pay close attention because I do have some prizes, gifts, and giveaways for those of you all that are extra attentive, all right? So let's go to the next slide. I got my niece running the slide for me. All right, so we'll begin with introductions real quick. Again, my name is Calvin Leroy King III. I'm the executive director of Free Lunch Academy. Free Lunch Academy is a nonprofit organization that aims to create inclusive environments via educational entertainment. So as I said, we do stage plays, but we also do workshops. We do personal and professional developments, and we also do after-school programming where we help young people that are interested in expressing themselves creatively write, direct, and produce their own original stage plays and skits about conflict resolution and how to overcome, you know, threats of violence and bullying-related behavior. Now it's you all's turn. I just want a couple volunteers, just maybe 3 volunteers that can raise their hand, tell me their name, their age. If you're a young person, if you're an adult, you can just say I'm grown. Something interesting about you and something that interests you and something interesting about you. So one thing that interests you and one thing that is interesting about you. All right, so anybody can raise their hand or I can just call on y'all. Going once, going twice. The brother with the glasses. Right here. Yes, sir, you. What's your name, brother? Say it again. Lee? All right. How old are you, Lee? All right, 15. Now tell me something that interests you. What are you into? Football? What position? Okay. We're going to see. And then something interesting about you. You funny? We'll tell a joke then. Not on the spot. You more conversational funny. Can we give Lee a round of applause, y'all? Give Lee a round of applause. All right. Do I have one more person? Don't give me no eye contact. It's going to be you. Here we are right here, ma'am. Yep.
My name is Garnet.
I am grown.
I work at the Zion Township Library.
Okay. And let us get one. That's interesting already. So let us get one thing that you're interested in.
I'm interested in providing learning experiences for the youth of today.
Very good. Can we give a round of applause? Round of applause. Round of applause. And one more lucky person. One more lucky person that would like to introduce themselves. Richard Hill. We already got your name. Jonte. Let's go with, he's grown. We know he's grown, even though he got the baby face. Give us one thing that interests you.
You.
Thank you. That's my man. And then one thing interesting about you.
My daughters.
There it is. Give a round of applause for Richard, please. All right, next slide. So today we just have a few learning objectives, and thank you all for participating in that icebreaker. It's always good to just warm the crowd up a little bit so nobody feels like, hey, Felicia. On the real. So nobody feels like this is not going to be interactive and it's not going to be entertaining. This is what I do, so y'all do it with me, all right? But we do have some learning objectives. Again, we practice educational entertainment. So just think about how many people in here have a favorite movie or TV show by raising hands. I'm not going to call on you. Just, okay, everybody, somebody, power. Yeah, okay. How many people in here have a favorite subject in school for all you students? Favorite subject? So what we do at Free Lunch Academy, we try to take your favorite show and combine it with your favorite subject so you can get educational entertainment. Y'all with me? All right? But as it pertains to conflict resolution, we have some objectives, some learning objectives today. First thing is, if we want to know how to deal with, become aware of, and overcome the challenges of conflict, we have to first know what it is. So our first learning objective is to define what conflict actually is. All right? The second learning objective is to determine what causes conflict. And there's a lot of different ways that conflict shows up in our community, whether it's in our homes, in our schools, or for some of you all, in the workplace. Next, we want to know what helps resolve conflict if and when it does arise. And last but not least, how can we prevent conflict? Because a lot of times when we go to schools, we come after a situation has happened. We had a situation on the south side where a young, maybe third grader, I want to say, brought an unloaded gun to school because they were in fear for their safety, so they just wanted to intimidate the person that was, kind of threatening their personal space. So we came in, did a show, had a good laugh, learned a lot, and then, kind of diffuse the situation. But we want to more so be in schools that don't really have a lot of issues with bullying or with conflict or with things of that nature, because we want to be more preventative and more proactive instead of reactive and doing interventions all the time, okay? Next slide. So that's what we want to learn. So let's begin with our first learning objective, which is what is conflict. Now, conflict is defined as a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. Now, does anybody know what protracted means? Vocab word. It's right up there on the screen. No trick questions? Anybody want to read what protracted means? Anybody that's got good 20/20 vision? You, ma'am. Can you read to us what protracted means?
Lasting for a long time or longer than expected or usual.
Okay, so a serious disagreement or argument, typically one that lasts for a long time or longer than expected or usual. That is the definition of conflict, okay? Now, what are some synonyms or some words associated with conflict? When you think of conflict, what comes to mind? You, sir. Dispute. Very good. Use the context clue. You, brother. You, brother. You knew it was you. You, brother. When you think of conflict, what word comes to mind? Disagreements. What you got? Argument. Somebody said something over here? A fight. Beef. Getting into it. We can use phrases, So a lot of these different synonyms are what we associate with getting into it, beefing, fighting, things of that nature. I'm going to use that all-encompassing term of conflict today. That's cool? All right, next slide. So what causes conflict, right? Another one of our objectives. We want to know what conflict is, and we know it's an extended argument or disagreement or quarrel or dispute, but what actually causes it? Now, we want to relate this to you all's work experience. How many of you young people in here are the actual workers that are being celebrated tonight? Raise your hand, raise your hand. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Good job. Can we give them a round of applause real quick? I never actually had the opportunity growing up in Zion to work with the township during the summer. My man John T, he always did, you know what I'm saying? Lee McCoy, you know, they always was doing their thing. But I was the paper boy, right? And I don't even think, that's not a thing anymore, is it? Y'all don't get y'all papers delivered, do y'all? But I was the new son kid, you know what I'm saying? So I used to just, you know, pass the paper out. But it was totally different having that experience to look back on, to know the responsibility that goes into having a job, to know the accountability, to know how supportive your parents have to be in order for you to start a program and finish a program successfully. So that's why I wanted you to give the young people a round of applause. Now, getting back to the lesson at hand, conflicting goals. So when you have a work experience, how many of you that raised your hand, this is your first job? 1, 2, so a couple, pretty much all y'all. Okay. Y'all just raise your hands kind of slow. Okay. So with it being your first job, you might have come into it saying, man, I'm trying to get as much money as I can for the least amount of work, right? I know that's how I approach work sometimes, right? I'm just being honest. So if you are going into a job with that type of mentality and somebody else is, let's say they're working this for their second year or third year, and they're like, man, this is a great opportunity. I really take pride in, you know, helping out with the seniors, cleaning up around my community, picking up trash and just making sure beautification is taking place in my community and my town. Y'all goals might be a little bit off when it comes to, man, how seriously are we going to take this work? You might punch in and think, man, I just want to get it done, get it over with. And that person might be like, I'm not leaving till the job is done, and you shouldn't want to either, right? That might be a conflicting goal, a conflicting resource. So let's just say, for example, one person has a job this summer and then your friend doesn't, right? So now when the weekend comes and you done put in Monday through Friday on the clock, you get that little paycheck, you want to run out, and the Dooms ain't here no more, is it? No Dooms? Okay. Y'all go to Gurney Mills still? Is that a thing? Wherever y'all go, wherever y'all blow y'all money at, you want to go blow your money on the weekend, and your friend doesn't really have resources like you because they haven't put in the work throughout the week. That could lead to a conflict for the haves and the have-nots. Y'all with me? All right. Personalities. Now, I like to break down personalities into 2 words, personal realities. So my reality is my reality. MacArthur's is MacArthur's. Yours is yours. Everybody has different point of views, perspectives, and that turns into the way we view the world and the way we act in it. So a lot of times that can lead to conflict just because I might not rock with you. You might be my coworker, but we're not friends in school, right? So if I take the fact that we're not friends in school, or even not just not friends, but I don't know you that well, right? And I take that kind of approach to you being my coworker, we might bump some heads. We might not give each other the benefit of the doubt as would be the case if we were working with our friends, okay? Values and beliefs. Getting back to the beautification piece. Some people take a lot of pride in being from Zion, take a lot of pride in being able to help their community out, take a lot of pride in being able to earn an honest dollar as opposed to doing something else to earn money, right? When you have different values and beliefs than somebody else that you might be working with or interacting with and things of that nature, those could potentially lead to conflicts as well. Again, if you take pride in your work, you're going to want to make sure the job is done with excellence as opposed to somebody else that's like, it's just a summer job. I'm not really learning any real skills. It's not important. It's not going to serve me in the long-term future goals that I have. Therefore, I'm not taking it seriously. So you guys might bump heads a little bit on the job. Same with styles and approaches. Personal relationships. How many of you work with your friends this summer? Anybody? All right. How many of you had no friends coming into the program? Anybody? Okay. I hope you made some. Did you? There we go. But a lot of times your personal relationships, when you come to work with those things, somebody might have a conflict with you. Like, man, why those two always working together? They don't never want to work with nobody new. They too buddy-buddy, right? But then on the contrary, like when I was growing up, I was that annoying kid, you know, just buzzing, joking, laughing, poking fun at people, whatever. And I might be the annoying kid, the bothersome kid that you got to work with. You're like, man, why I got to work with Calvin, man? This dude play too much. He always off task. He's never serious. Those types of things, right? So it can go both ways. It can be like too buddy-buddy on the job, or it can be too bothersome on the job, depending on you all's personal relationships with one another. Incompetence in leadership or modeling. Now, this might rub some of the adults the wrong way, but if you're in charge of these young people and you don't know what you're talking about, right? You don't know how to do your job effectively, or you don't know how to model appropriate behavior. For example, telling kids, hey, you need to dress a certain way, get here at a certain time, do these things while on the job, and you're not doing them, that is improper modeling, incompetent leadership, and at the end of the day, the kids are not going to say, the young people are not going to say, do what we say, they're going to do what they see us do. Do y'all agree with that, adults? Y'all woke? Okay, cool. And then the last one, all these things can lead to misunderstandings and or miscommunications. And again, that's something as easily as my boss told me, the team that I'm in charge of, we all need to pick up all this trash, and then we're going to take the trash bags and dump them on the curb so that the next man can come and get them. If I leave out one tidbit of information, and then the people that come to get the trash bags are like, why the trash bags not by the curb? Oh, well, my boss or my team leader forgot to tell me. That miscommunication could lead to a conflict because I end up looking bad, even though I did a good job. I had goals, I had resources, I had the personality needed to get the job done, but because of miscommunication of one of my team members or teammates, that could potentially rub me the wrong way if I'm the one that's left holding the bag, pun intended, all right? Next slide. So now that we know what conflict is, back to texting. Now that we know what conflict is and what causes conflict, let's talk more so about what can potentially resolve conflict, or where does it end. All right, so the first thing that has to happen in any potential conflict resolution scenario, you have to have all the parties involved, they must have a desire to resolve the conflict. How many people, by a show of hands, have ever heard the term, it takes two to tango? Anybody ever heard that? And it takes two fools to argue, right? So it also takes two wise people to resolve a conflict. If we get into it, and I'm like, man, I was wrong. I came at him or her the wrong way, or vice versa. But I don't want it to be like that. I don't want that work environment to be unpleasant tomorrow for myself or for the other people I work with. Then now I have a desire to resolve the situation. I want to resolve the conflict. However, everybody, or both people at least, in that situation have to want to do that as well, or else it will never happen. Because if I want to get out the situation, you like, I'm cool not being cool with Calvin. I'll just avoid him, not pay attention to him, whatever the case may be. We might never resolve that thing, and then we go back to school the next year. It's still unresolved, and it might blow up again because we never had a chance to share each other's perspective, build empathy for one another, and get an understanding and put the situation to rest. Agreed? All right? So you have to have the desire to resolve the conflict. You also have to have active communication, right, regarding your motives, your intentions, your beliefs, and the things that led to the conflict. So me, when I was growing up, if I would get mad, I would shut down, right? So somebody would say, man, what's wrong, Calvin? You just, turned up on Mr. Rodriguez in the hallway. And I'd be like, I'm not talking about it, right? So I wouldn't have active communication. I would be like, don't bother me. I'm not bothering you. I don't feel like expressing myself. And I think what was underlying was I didn't know how to express myself, right? How many young people, you don't have to raise your hand, but just think about it. How many times have you gotten into it with your parents, with your siblings, with your coworkers, with your classmates, and you just didn't know how to get them to understand where you were coming from, right? That's a challenging feeling. And sometimes you just shut down instead of trying over and over again to engage in active communication. You have to have patience with the process. Just like it takes like one of those roller coasters at Great America, it goes up real slow before you get to the peak, and then it comes down real fast. That's how a conflict is. If I'm getting into it with you, it's probably not one thing, it's probably not two things, it's probably like that 10th thing that's like, all right, we fighting, right? But if it gets to the point where we're about to fight and we're like, nah, let's resolve this conflict, that way down is coming, it's a process as well. It might be a little bit faster, it might be a little bit slower, but it is a process. So when you do have the desire to want to resolve the conflict, when you are willing to engage in active communication, you still have to understand that you still have to be patient to let the process work its course. Next is attempting to understand and then be understood. Here is where you're supposed to really do some self-reflection, right? So in order to know my motives, my intentions, my beliefs that led to the conflict, I have to do some soul searching. Like, why am I so passionate about making sure that I'm the best employee the summer program has ever seen? Why do I care so much about the fact that my coworker doesn't care? Why does that have such an impact on me, right? So when you start doing that self-reflection internally, when it gets to the point where you guys are sharing and doing active communication, you should want to get the same perspective from the person that you're into it with. And this can pertain to the work environment. It could pertain to the classroom. It could pertain to the household or anywhere in between. You want to seek to understand and then be understood, okay? And then the last piece is engaging in collective negotiations. So in negotiations, that could take place like a lot of parents maybe had to negotiate their salary for, their household income when they got a new job, right? A lot of you all, it probably was just, this is what it is and you just got to take it, right? But you will have opportunities in life to negotiate on your behalf. Ultimately, in a negotiation, you want everybody in that negotiation to feel like they came out, winning something, or everybody feels like it's a win-win situation. But a lot of times that's not the case. So for example, if you keep coming to work late, your boss calls you into the office and says, this isn't working, we're going to have to go a different direction, I'm sorry, you're fired. You say, man, well, I understand, and I won't report to work next week or tomorrow. The negotiation pretty much was one-sided in that you're fired, the opportunity has been passed, and the boss is still going to be the boss, and you just out of work and out of money for the summer. But if it's a situation where the first time that you come in late, the boss calls you in and say, hey, just want to remind you, remember in orientation, we told you can't come late. The third time you do this is going to be, immediate termination and things like that. I just want to encourage you to get here on time going forward. Cool, that's a warning. Second time, you might have a similar but a little bit more assertive conversation. And then the third time, you get fired, but now you feel more so like I had the chance to correct my behavior. They gave me more than enough chances or whatever the case may be. And now you might not feel some type of way when they fire you after 3 warnings versus 1, okay? So again, in negotiations, that just means that we're trying to come to a compromise, but it doesn't have to be a 50-50 compromise, what I want you all to understand here. Next slide. All right, so now let's talk about the different dimensions of conflict resolution. And as it says in the subtitle, it's levels to this flick, all right? The steps related to conflict and conflict resolution are very similar in the way that they are both processed. So when you have a conflict, all right, so we got conflicts on the left. We have a conflict, you have a desire for a conflict versus a resolution. You're always going to have a desire one way or another. You can't really do it with somebody with having absolutely no desire to get into it with them, even if they're the ones that are being the protagonists and the antagonists, and they're saying, hey, you my target, you my victim for the day, and I'm at you. You still have to respond, you still have to react, you still have to not take the higher road. So there has to be some level of desire to either get into a conflict or to get out of one. Also, there has to be, in a conflict, inactive communication, meaning just shutting down and shutting off, or communicating improperly, trying to yell over each other, trying to speak over each other, versus an active communication where, again, I'm seeking to understand you, so I have to listen to you and hear your point of view before I can ever go and say my piece. Impatience with the de-escalation, that's a conflict. Patience with the de-escalation process, that's going to lead to conflict resolution. Seeking to be understood and then understand the other person, that's the reverse. We actually want to seek to understand the other person and then seek to be understood. And then last but not least, individual aims versus collective aims. When you're in a conflict, you're just worried about me, my, I. What does it take for me to win in this particular scenario? When you're trying to resolve a conflict, you're focused more so on the collective. Sometimes it's not just you and that other person. Sometimes it's an entire community of people that are affected by your conflict. So you'll have everybody's intention in mind when you're trying to resolve the conflict. All right? Y'all still with me? Okay. Y'all very attentive. Next slide, please. All right. So just 3 different types of resolutions. One is cognitive. That's the way we think about the conflicts that we get into. So that'll show up in your perspective or your point of view, the way that you understand or the way that you process the conflict that you're in, or the different attitudes that you might have towards that particular conflict. Emotional, simply put, is the way that you feel about the conflict, and behavioral is based on how I think, based on how the situation makes me feel. These are the choices and the actions and the behavior patterns that I'm going to engage in accordingly, okay? Next slide. So now let's talk about the different methods to getting towards the happiness. There's usually a method to the madness. In this situation with conflict resolution, we're talking about a method to the happiness, because we all just want to be happy at the end of the day, right? So negotiation, again, is a dialogue that aims to have a beneficial outcome for one or all parties involved. In that example I gave earlier, who was probably happy? The kid that got fired or the boss? the boss that don't have to deal with the late kid anymore, right? But in the second part of that example, when I said, you know, I gave you 3 opportunities, now the kid might not feel some type of way or slighted or like the world is unfair because I was late one time and I got fired. Hey, I got a warning, I got a written up warning, and then I got terminated. Mediation. That's when a neutral third party assists in trying to come to some type of agreement. So if you ever get into it with a teacher at school, for example, you might get sent to the office, and then they might bring in the principal or the dean or whoever, somebody that wasn't involved with the conflict is, to try to hear both sides and to try to, you know, come to some type of conclusion that makes everybody happy. I see you laughing. You get in trouble at school a lot? Oh, okay. And then last but not least, creative peace building. Now, this is one of the dopest things that are really starting to come about in the research and all this good stuff. Instead of just having 2 people to get into it, negotiate, or 3 people with a mediator try to negotiate out of the situation, they try to bring the entire community into the room and into the space. So that's anybody that was impacted either directly or indirectly by that particular conflict. So for example, 2 workers get into it. Instead of just saying the boss is going to come in, hear both sides of the story, and then, you know, come to a mediation resolution, they're going to say everybody that had anything to do with the situation, whether you saw it, whether you heard about it, whether you're the parents of the kids that got into it, everybody's going to come in, have their thoughts, opinions, feelings, emotions, and beliefs put on the table so everybody knows the impact that it has. So instead of saying, okay, Jimmy and Johnny got into it, we mediated it, and now they're friends, Jimmy and Johnny got into it, we mediated it in a creative peace building situation. So now everybody knows what's going to happen in the event that you get into it with Jimmy or Johnny or somebody else. Okay? So it's more of a community approach. Next slide. And then we're talking about the different models of how you can get to a resolution for any conflicts you might find yourself in. Now, the first is avoidance. What do you think avoidance conflict model is? Based on the word avoidance, what does that mean? Does that mean you're proactively trying to solve it, or you're trying to run and hide to make sure the situation never happens? Probably the latter, right? So this is my question. Do you think that that's a good way to approach a good conflict style to have, is avoidance? If you just avoid conflict all your life, do you think that's going to work out for you in the long run? You don't think so? I don't think so either. So then the next one would be yielding conflict. How many people in here, young people, drive? Anybody got their license? You got your license? Anybody? Oh, y'all young, right? All right, so all my drivers. All right, we're going to open it up to the non-young people. When you hear yield, what do you have to do when you see the sign that says yield? You have to what? Okay, you have to slow down, and sometimes you have to stop, right? And then let's say that you yield or you stop, and there's a car coming from either direction. Who gets to go, you or the other car? The other car, right? So young people, when you hear yielding conflict style, that means that when I'm trying to resolve this conflict, I don't care about what's going to make me happy in the situation. All I care is you go ahead, get your way. It's pretty much like if you, I don't want to say it in a negative way, but it sounds like somebody that's like a scaredy cat, right? Like, I don't want to get into it with Felicia no more, so just go ahead and walk over me. I'll either avoid you, or when we get into it, you right, my fault. My fault for you stepping on my shoe. Like, you just go to the extreme to try to make the other person happy. That's what yielding is. When it comes to competitive, how many people play competitive sports? I know Lee does, right? When you compete in any type of arena, what are you trying to do at the end of the game? You're trying to win. So it's the opposite of yielding. So if I have a conflict resolution style that's more competitive, that means I don't care about your needs, your wants, your thoughts, your feelings, or your desires. I just care about my own. So you're not getting anything, and I want this to be a very one-sided resolution. Next is conciliation. So if you ever heard the word reconciliation, that's where we're trying to come to a compromise that makes everybody happy, get as close to that 50-50 win-win situation as possible, and that's oftentimes hard to achieve. But it does try to find an intermediate concern for both persons' outcomes. Last but not least is the one I like the most, and that's cooperation conflict style. Again, this is when you take that creative peace building model and you say, I have an active concern for both pro-self, the people that are individually involved in the situation or the conflict, but also for pro-social behaviors. Because if we can correct this potential conflict and resolve this potential conflict the right way, not only will it resolve the conflict at hand, but it can possibly prevent future conflicts from arising. Okay, so that's cooperation conflict style. Next slide. It's stuck. No, it went. All right, so then here are some high-level strategies for us adults that are in charge of young people, and even not young people, adults as well can benefit from these strategies as well. And if you want to stop conflicts in the workplace before they begin, here are some suggestions. Establish a culture of prevention. That can show up in modeling. For those of us that are senior leadership or managers or whatever the case may be, we want to model appropriate behavior. We also want to move towards rewarding positive behavior. Those young people that go the extra mile to make sure that conflict is not happening, or when it does happen, we diffuse it as early as possible in a positive manner. We want to reward those behaviors instead of just saying, hey, if you get into it with your coworker, you're going to get fired, or you're going to get suspended, or you're going to get a slap on the wrist. We don't want to be punitive. We want to be reward-based. And then we also want to address all potential conflicts with parity. Now, what I mean by that is, if Jimmy and Johnny get into it, but Jimmy is your favorite worker and Johnny is not so much, you can't treat them differently in that situation. Okay? You want to have parity. You want to have you want to treat everybody equal. All right? Some additional things you might want to consider are leverage evidence-based prevention models. There's a lot of things out there that I went over today that is based on research and data and science, and you want to use those things anytime that you have a conflict in your environment to make sure that whatever the best practice is, you're trying to implement that across the board. You want to create prevention certification courses or programs. So at the beginning of this program, you all might have had to go through some training and things of that nature. Is that true, or did I make that up? Did y'all have any type of training for the job? Orientation, right. So maybe included in the orientation, you want to have a course or at least an hour that you dedicate towards conflict resolution. So now they can wear it as a badge of honor to say, man, I already know how to identify a conflict when it arises, I know how to address it, and most importantly, I know how to proactively prevent it from occurring in the first place. And last, always know that there's more to learn. For example, young people, I'm sure you guys are real heavy on the social media. That's something that's new and different for the work environment that people are just now coming up with best practices for to try to figure out, is social media allowed on the job? Can we, befriend our coworkers and our bosses and things like that? Or can these things be detrimental to the work environment? So there's always going to be more to learn, and you all, because you're so involved in the social media, you're probably going to become the experts on that. So don't think that adults should always be telling you how to resolve conflict. Sometimes y'all get into it in different ways that we're not even familiar with. You probably need to tell us how we can help you help each other, okay? All right, now we're going to test you all's knowledge, I believe. Next slide. Time to test your learning. All right, next slide. So now this is the part where if you can answer a question correctly, I have a little giveaway for you. And this is just to see who's been paying attention. First question is, which is not a synonym of conflict? Which is not a synonym of conflict? A, dispute, B, harmony, C, disagreement, or D, quarrel? All the way in the back. B, harmony. Give her a round of applause. Give her a round of applause. Grab her first. Could you come up here? Could you come up here? Please. All right, next slide. All right, second question is, what can cause, she got it back there. What can cause conflict? What can cause conflict? A, conflicting goals. B, conflicting perceptions. C, conflicting styles or approaches. D, personal relationships. Or E, all of the above. Right here. Why you raise your hand and get shy? Quick. E, all of the above. Give her a round of applause. Round of applause. Round of applause. The next question is, which is not a way to resolve conflict? Which is not a way, she got you back there. Which is not a way to resolve conflict? A, having a desire to resolve the conflict. B, communication. C, impatience. Or D, negotiations. C, impatience. Give a round of applause, round of applause, round of applause. All right. Next slide. What is the most ineffective way? She got you back there. What is the most ineffective way? The most ineffective conflict resolution style. What is the most ineffective conflict resolution style? Meaning we don't want to engage in this particular type of conflict resolution style. A, conciliation. B, yielding. C, avoidance. Or D, Cooperation. C, avoidance. Give her a round of applause. Round of applause. We don't want to just go around avoiding conflict. There's something I learned. I forgot who taught me this, but if you're in any type of relationship, whether it's a husband and a wife, a brother and a sister, co-worker, friend, whatever, the only guaranteed in that relationship is going to be conflict. Conflict is naturally occurring, so we don't want to avoid it. We want to learn how to deal with it, okay? All right, next, we already on it. All right, what is one way to possibly prevent conflict? A, model improper behavior. B, punish those who participate in conflict. C, assume whatever worked before is all that will work now. Or D, create prevention certification courses or programs. So D, once again, is create prevention certification courses or programs. Which is one possible way you can possibly prevent conflict? D is correct. Give them a round of applause. Round of applause. Next slide. All right, so now I have anybody that wants to win a t-shirt. I just got a bonus question, all right? What are you willing to do the next time a potential conflict arises? It could be something we went over or something you come up with on your own. I want to hear from the young people. When you hear next, y'all about to get into a conflict right now. Next time a conflict arises, what is the one thing you personally are willing to commit to make sure that that doesn't happen again? Say that one more time. Okay, so when you say tell them that they're right and that you're wrong, how would you know that they're right? Say that last part again. I didn't hear you. If they keep coming up to you, nah, come on, you got it.
If they keep coming up to you, bothering you,
Mm-hmm.
not listening, then just stop being bothered and
Just let them do them. It's kind of ignore it. All right, tell me what type of conflict style it is, conflict resolution style it is. When I said, just go ahead. Which one is that? Yielding. Give her a round of applause. Give her a round of applause. We got anybody else that wants to say what they're willing to commit to the next time they might be in a potential conflict? I want to hear from both of y'all, because y'all over there. Let me hear from one of y'all. What's one thing y'all can do to avoid the conflict y'all in right now? You said what? Yeah, she already took that answer. Come get your shirt though. What's something else you could do? Even if it's something that we didn't cover. What works for you to avoid conflict? Because it might work for somebody else in the room. Walk away. All right. So can you give me something that's not kind of yielding or avoidance? You said what? What'd she say? Yeah, I ain't say nothing. Anybody?
Have you and that person that you have a conflict with sit down and actually talk about it?
That's what I was looking for. Give her a round of applause. Give her a round of applause. Give her a round of applause. Next slide. All right. And at the end of the day, young people, I just want to let you know that when you just have that desire that we talked about earlier to avoid conflict, to intervene when conflict arises, or to prevent conflict if and when it does, when you see it potentially occurring, we're all winners at the end of the day. So whether you got a shirt or not, if you learn just one thing today, then we're all winners, all right? So this is the last slide right here. Damo, last slide. Oh, Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, or if anybody has anything that they want to say as it pertains to the topic of conflict, because I'm sure we're all, at some level, experts on this subject. I don't think anybody in this room has never been in a conflict, or am I wrong? Even babies probably get into conflicts, right? So is there anything that we didn't cover or something that you're like, hey, well, what about this? Or any questions that you might have on conflict and or conflict resolution? I know it wasn't as entertaining as last year, but at the end of the day, we're here to learn something. Yes, ma'am. Right.
What are some ways that kids can learn how to communicate better?
So the question was for those young people that seem to shut down and don't engage in the active communication when they're trying to resolve a potential conflict, what are some strategies or practices that can help them overcome that challenge? One thing I would say is all kids aren't comfortable communicating orally. So maybe they have to write something down, right? Maybe they have to, what we do is act things out. So we give young people the opportunity to actually do some role playing and things of that nature. What's something else that we didn't suggest that maybe can help that for a young person that's struggling to express themselves? Anybody else have any other suggestions? Give them time. A lot of times we try counseling, right, with somebody that they may not know, right, as opposed to talking to somebody that you're going to see the next day. You might want to have that more confidential conversation, right? You might want to give them time. A lot of times, as soon as a conflict happens, we want to say, all right, sit down, talk about it, figure it out. And it's like, I'm not ready. It's a process. So sometimes you got to give them that chance to just de-escalate, woosah, reflect, and then engage with the other person. All right? Very good question. Any more questions before we get out of here and you get on with the program? Sister with the hat. Mm-hmm. Right. That's a great question. So it was in terms of punishment or punitive repercussions anytime that a young person gets into a conflict and you want to motivate them to not get into conflicts going forward. I would say, one, be firm. So whatever you say it is, but be fair. My mom, Sherry King, she would say, if you get into it, conflict, suspension, detention, call home, you grounded for the rest of the month. It don't matter if it was the 1st or the 29th. You know what I'm saying? So it was kind of making me make sure that if I was going to get in some trouble, it was going to be towards the end of the month, because she wasn't wavering off that you can't go outside for the rest of the month. So be firm, but be fair, right? My mom was the type of person that would believe the teacher over me. I don't know what type of parent you are or stuff like that, but you got to know your child. So at the end of the day, it depends. You know what I'm saying? And if it's a taking of a cell phone, maybe just for safety reasons, it's the taking of the cell phone while the kid is in the house, but they can still take it to school with them to make sure that they have, in case of emergency, things like that. But at the end of the day, and it sounds like an easy way out, it depends on the child. Any other questions? I thought I saw your hand.
How do you deal with conflicts whenever you're in an argument with somebody and they're very arrogant about the situation? So like if you do say, yeah, you're right, and they just like arrogant about it, like, yeah, I know I'm right, when they really not. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so the question was, how do you deal with conflict resolution when it comes to an arrogant person, right? So even if you take the approach of yielding and you say, you right, go ahead, we'll have the bam, instead of just going on, they like, yeah, I know I was right, right? At the end of the day, you have to model, right? You have to be the bigger person in a lot of these conflicts because, again, it takes two to tango. It takes two fools to argue, right? So if you resolve the conflict and just because they had to get that last word and say, yeah, I knew you was going to back down, and that's what gets you re-engaged in the conflict, you might as well have not resolved it in the first place. So you have to be genuine in your desire to resolve the conflict, that even if we were to get into it, I was to yield to you and say, go ahead, you right, I'm wrong, and you threw it in my face, I would have to just eat that and be okay with it because at the end of the day, the conflict is still resolved. So you have to be the bigger person. And it's not easy to do, but that's a great question. All right, anybody else? I think that's my time. But I appreciate y'all. Can y'all give yourselves a round of applause for being a lovely audience? All right, last slide. Damo, last slide. So this last slide is just contact information. If anybody wants to follow up with me or Free Lunch Academy, we're at freelunchacademy.com, freelunchacademy@gmail, and that's my business phone number if you want to holler at your boy. Thank y'all. Love y'all. See y'all next year.
Thank you very much. You want to have your niece come out from his
Damo.
husband behind the curtain for him?
We got it.
Here we go.
Give it up for Dominique. Dominique Taylor.
Be a buddy, not a bully. Gotta be a buddy. Be a buddy, not a bully. Gotta be a buddy.